Just one day before the U.S.-China tariffs were set to take effect, Donald Trump, who had been threatening to use further tariff hikes to teach China a lesson, went ahead and signed a new order, once again extending the suspension of those tariffs for another 90 days. Combined with Trump's sell or be banned stance on TikTok, many speculate that the China tariffs will likely end up like the TikTok ban, indefinitely postponed. This tactic of kicking the can down the road has, unsurprisingly, put a topic Trump would rather avoid back in the headlines. Trump is surely aware of the consequences of delaying the China tariffs, so why would he make such a choice? Hello, everyone. Today, let's talk about the strategic dilemma behind Trump's procrastination. For a leader like Trump, who is so focused on projecting an image of strength to the world, any retreat he makes is ultimately because the real world has slapped him with the facts. His plan isn't working. As a president with a business background, Trump believed that taxes are a major pain point for businesses. Therefore, if the U.S. government wielded the heavy hammer of tariffs, countries that were constantly taking advantage of the U.S. in trade would be hit hard. As for businesses passing the cost of tariffs onto American consumers, Trump wasn't the least bit worried. While he was a step above those Americans who seem to think products magically appear on store shelves, at least he knew that goods had to be produced in factories and shipped to stores for sale. His view was that the world is inherently a buyer's market. There's no shortage of businesses eager to make a profit. If foreign suppliers were unwilling to absorb the tariff costs, American-made products would naturally fill the market gap. In his view, foreign manufacturers raising their prices could even be a blessing in disguise for America. After all, isn't the decline of American manufacturing due to high domestic production costs, which makes its products too expensive to sell? Now, with the price of foreign goods also rising due to tariffs, American products would finally become more competitive. While this would lead to some inflation, it would also solve America's unemployment problem. As long as people are earning money and have a positive outlook on the future, he reasoned, a bit of inflation is perfectly acceptable. He pointed to the years right after World War II, when U.S. inflation spiked to a historic high of 20%, yet the American people didn't lose faith in the future of the country or their own prospects. However, since the U.S. began embracing neoliberalism in the 1980s, the country has been rapidly deindustrializing. Domestic capital shifted to the more lucrative financial sector, while manufacturing gradually moved to other countries with lower production costs. And while finance makes a lot of money, it requires little beyond capital itself, unlike manufacturing, which requires goods that need to be turned over quickly.
Vast networks of energy and transportation, finance can be run by a small number of elite traders in an office. In a capitalist system like America's, if something doesn't serve the interests of capital, you can't expect the government to keep funding it. As a result, America's infrastructure has crumbled from a lack of necessary upgrades or even basic maintenance. The educational level of the American working class has also declined significantly, to the point where the workforce can no longer support a revival of domestic manufacturing. This is why, even though the U.S. government recognized the importance of manufacturing after the 2008 financial crisis and launched reshoring initiatives with a series of incentives, the manufacturing sector's share of U.S. GDP continued to fall. Previous administrations had tried all sorts of incentives to revive American manufacturing and failed. For Trump to think that tariffs alone could instantly bring it back from the dead was clearly a pipe dream. So people watched as reality set in. When foreign suppliers refused to absorb the tariffs demanded by U.S. companies and halted shipments, American manufacturing was completely unable to fill the gap in the market. In fact, many of the few remaining U.S. manufacturers didn't increase production. Instead, they faced their own bankruptcy crises due to broken supply chains. Empty shelves and skyrocketing prices taught Trump a hard lesson. To prevent the situation from worsening, Trump was forced to announce a 90-day tariff suspension for countries that didn't retaliate just a week after the tariffs were first implemented. However, because China, the world's factory, had responded immediately with equivalent retaliatory measures, the empty shelf crisis in the U.S. saw little relief. Under these circumstances, Trump had to swallow his pride and proactively invite China to Switzerland to discuss bilateral trade issues. And even though China refused to concede any ground, Trump still agreed to a tariff suspension. Meanwhile, American businesses gradually began to accept reality. They stopped trying to force Chinese suppliers to bear the full cost of the tariffs, and instead dutifully passed most of the cost on to consumers. As American buyers' offers returned to reasonable levels, Chinese suppliers resumed shipments, and the supply crisis in the U.S. was finally resolved. From this, Trump realized that only China could truly exert pressure on the U.S. in a trade war. His attitude towards other countries grew even tougher. He pressured traditional U.S. allies like the UK, the EU, Japan, and South Korea into accepting what could be described as humiliating terms. But when facing China, this unbeatable opponent, Trump displayed the characteristic flexibility of a businessman. Everything was on the table, and if a deal couldn't be reached, it could be delayed for more talks.
Ultimately, this is because Trump now knows that if he raises tariffs on China to his previously proposed levels, the American public will be the first to break. Specifically, his supporters, the working-class rednecks of America, are the group most sensitive to price changes. If they realize Trump's policies are causing prices to rise, many will turn against him. This is something Trump absolutely cannot accept. Although Trump tried to shift the blame for inflation onto the previous Biden administration, American businesses, seeking to avoid a consumer boycott, started itemizing the price hikes directly on receipts, labeling them as the Trump tariff. This made it clear to the public that they were the ones ultimately footing the bill. With that, insisting on more tariffs against China became untenable. However, simply withdrawing these provocative tariffs was also unacceptable to Trump. It's not that such a reversal would cause him to lose face. In fact, Trump has gone back on his word plenty of times. Rather, canceling the China tariffs doesn't fit his political narrative of winning. Trump won the election largely because of America's relative decline. Since the 2008 financial crisis, life has become increasingly difficult for working-class Americans. While the government offered platitudes, it consistently failed to improve their situation. As a result, these voters lost faith in the political establishment, paving the way for the rise of an outsider like Trump. However, the failure of Trump's first term proved that his unconventional methods couldn't solve the nation's problems either. It was only because the Biden administration had to contend with the post-pandemic economy, which was in even worse shape than during Trump's first term, that Trump's record started to look better by comparison. This, combined with public sympathy generated by what many saw as political persecution against him, gave Trump the opportunity to make a comeback and win a second term. If Trump entered his first term with some genuine determination to change America, the lessons of that failure have clearly taught him that the country's real problems are not so easily solved. By comparison, making the American people feel like the government is on the path to solving problems, providing psychological comfort to keep them satisfied, is a much easier and more effective method. Thus, since Trump began his second term, even the official White House website has turned into a daily victory feed. While many of these victories don't hold up to scrutiny, years of feel-good education have left the American public with a level of critical thinking insufficient to spot the holes in the government's propaganda. Through this media campaign, Trump has successfully convinced his supporters that he is leading America to victory. But the strategy is not without its risks. The moment Trump can no longer keep winning, or when one of his wins is exposed as a loss in disguise, he will face a severe backlash. Therefore, even though Trump knows that raising tariffs on China is not feasible, he cannot simply cancel them. It doesn't fit the winning imperative. After all, no matter how much the public's critical thinking has been diminished, their basic judgment is still intact. No one would consider a return to the starting line a victory. This is especially true when the opponent is China, a country long demonized by the U.S. media. In America's current political climate, being anti-China has become a form of political correctness. The tougher a politician is on China, the more support they gain. In this context, backing down would undoubtedly be seen as weakness. And if his image as a tough strongman shatters, all his previous claims of victory would also be called into question. Caught in this awkward position, unable to win but unable to afford a loss, Trump has resorted to his master tactic: delay. While indefinite postponement doesn't sound particularly triumphant, as long as both sides are still in talks, it can't be said that America has lost. And with the right media spin, it can even be framed as a win. After all, in this trade war, the U.S. was the aggressor. As long as the outcome remains undecided, who's to say America isn't still successfully applying pressure on China?